It's been 2 days since the 2019 SEA Games drew to a close, and while we've had successes, there has been some fallout. Singapore Athletics has responded after it was the target of stern criticism over the state of the local sport, which resulted in a dismal SEA Games performance. In a media statement, President Tang Wen-fei expressed contrition, saying that this was a wake-up call and that more focus and work would be needed to rebuild. This was in response to comments by Singapore Sports Institute Chief of High Performance Richard Gordon at a post-mortem for Team Singapore's SEA Games performance. Mr. Gordon said the sport has a propensity for infighting in the past 2 to 3 years and has to get its act together. Now with us in the studio to share more is Correspondent Sazali Abdul Aziz. Hey Sazali.
Hi there.
Now Sazali, let's start off with what happened this time around to our athletes. How did they perform?
Well, Singapore returned with 3 bronze medals in total, and considering that major games like the SEA Games, Asian Games, have over 40 events, usually that's obviously not a very good return. But I wouldn't pin it down on the athletes who travelled there. Obviously, we know they tried their best. They wanted to do well for the country,
right.
But the situation has not been helped by issues like that have arisen, such as arguments between coaches and officials, parents getting involved, saying why is my son or my daughter not running in the relay team, and then last minute decisions to pull out runners and switch relay combinations and stuff like that. So all this is unsettles the athletes, and I think it's hard for people to expect gold medal winning performances when there's so much uncertainty.
Right. Now, Mr. Richard Gordon, of course, he noted a decline in results in the last 3 SEA Games. That's actually 6 years.
Yeah.
How far have we actually fallen?
I think the jarring statistic for this year is 0 goals, which is obviously never nice to see on the table. But I would say that it's actually a continuation of a decades-long problem, not just a recent one. I did some looking back, and in 8 editions of the SEA Games from 65 to 79, we won 33 gold medals, and in 20 editions since, which is more than double, we've won fewer. We've won 26. Partly that's down to there's now more countries in ASEAN and the SEA Games competing, and obviously standards have increased, and if we don't if we don't improve accordingly, we're going to lag behind, and that's what happened. It's been masked by the fact in the 90s and 2000s that James Wong used to win gold medals at every SEA Games he went to, and we had a couple of China throwers who also regularly won for us every 2 years. But yeah, I think it's a difficult problem for Singapore athletics to tackle. I think one key issue is attrition in athletes, because a lot of we tend to have a lot of success at age group level, under 18, under 16, even at schools, international or regional level. But by the time these athletes reach, so-called their peak age at 23, 24, 25, they've dropped out completely of the sport. So I think that's something that if we want to see the best of our athletes, we have to tackle.
Now, Sazali, besides Mr. Gordon's criticism of the athletics team's performance, the Singapore National Olympic Council also chided football for how the FAS dealt with the 9 players who broke the curfew. Now, what is the current situation with that?
So it's been over a week since we broke the news. I think it's a very multi-layered issue that has the FAS and the authorities have tried to piece together. So originally 6 boys were named as breaking curfew. They went somewhere. Obviously they weren't allowed to even leave the hotel. And 3 boys were later named 2 days later, and they went separately, so it was a separate incident. Either way, the FAS was criticised by the SNOC for firstly naming the players and also convening a disciplinary hearing for them on Wednesday night, which was eventually adjourned to a later date. FAS yesterday, late last night, they came out and responded and said, they did this for transparency and accountability, and they said they only released the players' names once they had written and oral admission from them. So I know the sentiment from the ground is some people feel that FAS threw the players under the bus to distract from a poor campaign, which, you know, obviously the Young Lions had a poor campaign. But I personally don't think so. And I think, you know, I think in due time, when maybe all the facts are made public, then I think some people will agree as well.
Now it's looking like a bit of an uphill task, you know, but what do you see in the immediate future for Singapore athletics?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, it's a decades-long problem. So I think even at regional level, it's going to be, a struggle. I think it's like starting a 100-meter race 20 meters behind already, you know, because you look at, you know, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, they've won medals at the Asian Games. Malaysia are producing a clutch of very good young sprinters at the moment, and the Philippines have their diaspora of foreign-based athletes, half Filipino and half overseas athletes. So it's really difficult. But I think if the right support is put in place in terms of financial support and also systemic support, for example, for like we mentioned, attrition, to tackle attrition, maybe support for student athletes who are in university, for example. I think that could help our athletes, and I think we have a couple of really good teenagers, Eric Yee, the thrower, and Campton Kam, the jumper. I think with the right support, I think they can go pretty far.
Right. Well, thank you, Sazali, for discussing this story with us, and we certainly hope that there will be brighter days ahead for all our athletes. Now, to read Sazali's full story, visit straitstimes.com.